Good morning, Sarah. It's lovely to have you here joining us from the National Estates Church Network. Would you be able to begin by telling us a little bit about you and about your role?
Certainly. My name's Sarah Barron and I am the Executive Director of National Estate Churches, though there's just two of us, so that's just a very grand title. I spent 20 years living in Hampshire and working on a large council estate called Lee Park, and that was probably the funnest time of my life. But now I live in Cornwall, which is the most beautiful place I've ever lived in my life. And we're pioneering here in Loo, but also I work for CURBS, which is Children in Urban Situations, which kind of connects up really well with the National Estate Churches Network. I'm married to Barney. We're both Baptist ministers, and and our 4 children just keep coming home.
Excellent. So first of all then, why do you think it's important for churches to have a ministry on housing estates?
I think that peppered through all of the New Testament is Jesus saying that we should be there for the marginalised. His actions were being with those who were perhaps the unlovely and or seen as that by other people. So I think our role is to do that. We were called to share the gospel, and if it's not in the places where people will feel marginal, then it's just not doing its job, because that was our calling. And I think that that's really important. And quite often, the whole government left behind thing, you kind of feel like there are communities that feel like nobody cares about them, and that is, God cares about everyone. So it's kind of what we should do.
Yeah, it's really challenging for those communities, isn't it, to feel left out and feel left behind. That's a really difficult thing. So we've seen several examples of work on estates which are termed as deprived estates, perhaps. Is estates ministry only relevant in these circumstances, or are there other ways in which you see estates ministry happening?
Yeah, I don't think it's only deprived. Obviously, some of the most deprived areas in the country are social housing estates, and so I guess that's where it gets the title from.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that we're called to serve the people in our neighbourhood, and that's whether those areas have are a low income community, or whether they are deprived in some way, or whether actually they're just a real mix of people. So lots of the new housing estates are built with a much more mixed expectation. There's some houses that sell and some that are social housing, so you have a much more of a mix up of people. Absolutely, we should be in the midst of that as well. We have an opportunity to show what good community can look like, and how we love one another and care for one another. So yeah, important to be in all the places.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. So do you have any advice for churches or teams who are keen to engage with this work, but perhaps at the moment are a bit unsure how to get started?
Yeah, I guess I have these kind of 5 L's. It's good just for remembering, but because I think it's not about doing a perfect program or a particular project, though those might be part of what you do. But most important is to listen to the community. And by listening, I mean kind of deep listening, listening to the history of that place, what has shaped it, who are the people who shape it and have shaped it in the past. What are the significant buildings in that place, and what do they say about who lives there, and their expectations of life, and how they present themselves. On the estate where we lived, it was kind of broken up into 3 areas, and one of them sort of saw themselves as a bit better than the rest, and that was because they were the other side of the dual carriageway, but still part of the same estate. but I think that it kind of divided the community at that point, because they put the dual carriageway in it. It didn't used to be there originally. And I think, you know, it's important to listen and hear those things about the community, and listen to the people. So who in your community are kind of the movers and the shakers? Who are the people that have influence? Who are the people who stand in the way of things? So that you know who those people are, and you know their motivations. You know, listen to the school. They will know the heartbeat of what's happening with children and young people, and actually with families across the place that you live. So listen and hear what they've got to say. When we first moved here, we met up with the 2 local councillors and just said to them, you know, what are the outstanding things about this community? You know, what are the joys? What are the challenges? And we learned such a lot from those conversations. Spend time just listening to the local people. I remember meeting a lady on the road just outside our house, just when we were about to buy the house, and she said, oh, you don't want to move here, it's a terrible place to live because it's not near anything, and the young people have nothing. And that's pretty depressing. But for her, she didn't drive. You know, actually she's highlighting, when you listen to that, she's highlighting that it's isolating to live in a place when you don't have a car, that actually, you know, her life is limited by that. And she felt that, you know, young people's lives were limited by that, I guess for the same reason they don't drive. And so they're kind of in this place. So I think that, and that deep listening doesn't just happen at the beginning of something, it just carries on happening, because things change over time. In the time that we lived in this place, you know, things have changed, and every time we have a census, you read it again, and there's difference in there, because actually communities have changed and evolved, and the people that live in them have changed. And so I would also say, look at statistics. I know that they sound a little bit boring, but actually they can tell us a lot about who lives where we are, and the situation that they're in, you know, whether there's big issues with health, or whether there's lots of people who live alone. These are, you know, all things that help us to know a little bit about our community before we get involved in it, or involved in it more, I guess. So the first one's listening, really important. The second one's living. I think if it's at all possible, it's really important to live in the place that you want to be a part of, because you become part of the community. You're not another person who just drops in. And sometimes people can feel a bit, I guess, intimidated by people who pop in, because there are other people that pop into the community, and they're not always people that they're keen to see or feel are not for them. So it's great to be a part of the community, to be one of those people, to be shopping in the local shop, and you know, and seeing the same people when you walk the dog in the morning. I'd always say have a dog, because they're quite useful for making relationships with people. Yeah, and be a part of that, you know, join in with the things that go on in the community. What are the things that people do there? When we moved to the estate, there was a housing association who used to come and do a monthly meeting in the church hall, which was always raucous, but if you weren't there, then you didn't care. So and I learned lots of stuff about how to stop your car from being stolen, which I just didn't do, and then have my car stolen, so I totally deserve that. But I think that, you know, that those are part of living in the area. You know, that listening tells you where will I fit in, where could I join in with what God's already doing, and how can I be a part of that. So listening, living, learning, come with open hands to learn, not just to give. I think it's really important to not come with, I know all the answers. and to come, you know, maybe I'll learn something new about me, maybe I'll learn something new about God. I certainly learned so much about God when I moved to the estate, and I learned more about me and than I probably ever gave to those people. I may have converted them to fresh coffee and salted butter, but other than that, I think that I learned more from them. So yeah, just hear what people have got to say, and sometimes a view that we've held without even realizing is challenged when we come face to face with people whose lives are very different from our own. I was really challenged by this gentleman recently who said, you know, who sits on your sofa with you? That's like an intimate place in your home. You generally share that with people who are like you. And his challenge was, you know, who else could you share your sofa with? People who are not like you or have different views to you, so that you could learn. I think learning about ourselves and about others is really important, and being open enough to say, I don't know all the answers, and that actually Jesus might have something to teach me as well as me speak of him. And liking. I think this is particularly important with children and young people, particularly young people. They're really good at seeking out people who don't really like the place that they live in or who they are. I think you've got to like where you live. I think that you should speak well of it. I think you should speak well of those people and try not to use terms which people find difficult or demeaning. Yeah, children just they will seek you out if you don't like them. They're like they know.
It's like the cat that jumps on your lap if you don't like a cat, isn't it? They make a beeline for you.
Yeah, they'll give you a really hard time if they think you don't like them. But I think it's really important to like the place that you live, and to really be proactive in speaking well of it, and to challenge other people when they don't. Well, the estate we lived on looked down on by other people in the surrounding area, kind of live in lovely middle class suburban places, and they would speak badly of Lee Park all the time, and the newspapers used to speak badly of Lee Park all the time. And we challenged them about, you know, actually there are positive and good stories that come out of this place. How about you say some of those stories, not just the ones about, you know, cars being set on fire, or, you know, people you know, there being a disruption. That those things happen in all places. It's just you know, sometimes when people feel looked down on, they behave the way that they're seen, and so we should speak well of them. So important to like where you live and like the people there. But obviously the most important, and you know, we're told that the greatest thing is love. We need to love people, and love is deeper than a slushy, I'll give you a hug, or I'll, you know, say I love you, but then I'll speak badly of you to someone down the road. Love is about challenging people. It's about being able to be honest and truthful about your own life as well as, and then you earn the right to speak into other people's. But actually, that being vulnerable with others is really important, because then they know that you love them when, and you can't speak those things unless you do love them. And love is deep and broad, and means, you know, a sacrifice of ourselves sometimes in order to put others first. Well, I know, probably all the time. Like marriage, you know, there's a sacrifice in that, but we get back what we put in. So love, listening, living, learning, liking, loving. I think these are the, you know, bedrock of working in any community, but particularly in a community that feels unloved by others.
Wow, there's so much in there, isn't there? It's I think often we come thinking perhaps we've got the answer to things without really listening and sort of asking the questions that give us the answer we want to hear. And I'm really challenged by who sits on my sofa. I was just trying to reflect over that in my head, and yeah, that's an amazing analogy, isn't it? Who do you share your sofa with? Great. Yeah, thank you. That's really helpful. I suppose just kind of a little bit in the time we are in now, I think some churches I've been working with have been thinking about doing some estates work for a while. With COVID and one thing and another, the estates have gone up and been built, and they perhaps thought they'd do something right at the beginning. Would you say it's too late to start now, or would that be okay to kind of go in there at this time? What do you think?
It's never too late. I think, you know, that I guess there's a learning together if you start at the beginning, but actually it's never too late. We move into places all the time, but it is about coming and listening, and perhaps, you know, quite important to come as guest and not as the host of everything. We don't need to run stuff. Actually, the times that I saw things turn around, particularly here, well, I don't like to say that COVID gave us opportunity, but I guess it did. That was the moment when everyone's going, who can volunteer and what skills are you bringing to that? Well, I'm happy to join in with your volunteering. And, you know, I've done a lot of listening in my time, pastoral caring of people. And so you get invited into that, and then you get invited into other things. So I think that coming as a guest and just giving that posture of guest, actually those people might invite you in to get involved in their community, and you can hear what's going on there. And in fact, you know, think about the stories. Jesus was nearly always guest. I mean, sometimes he did something within it that was like a host, like turning water into wine, but actually he came as guest to things. He came as guest to people's homes, and I think got invited in, you know, got invited into people's homes. I think that that's the posture. We should come to something that's new, but we weren't there right at the beginning when they were all learning. Yeah, definitely not too late. All the same rules apply, the listening and the kind of joining in, and what's already going on there. You know, God's been at work in the world for quite a long time, way longer than we are, and he'll still be here when we're gone. So we have this fleeting moment. So it's just looking, you know, where's God at work and what can I join in with? Yeah, there'll be things.
And there's a real authenticity, isn't there, about that being kind of that grassroots thing of people sort of being a guest in a place and understanding that. And I think so many of communities often see organisations kind of parachute in, and they get to know, oh, they'll be here for 3 years until the funding runs out and then they'll be gone. And actually that's quite demoralising for communities, whereas if they're right there, you know, with them on the ground, then that's really positive. So thank you. I hope that's an encouragement to those churches that are thinking of doing stuff and have worried that they've missed the boat.
Yeah, get in there.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the other things for communities, and I suppose particularly in Cornwall, but probably everywhere, is that, you know, we're seeing lots more estates being built, and housing can be quite contentious in certain communities, with holiday homes, with places that are perhaps unaffordable for local families. Where places are particularly divided on new housing being built, would you give any advice on how churches work in that scenario, where people perhaps may be worried about possibly alienating one section of the community?
Yeah, it is challenging. I find myself sometimes giving a face when next door there's flats, and you know, somebody was living there, a family, and asked to move so that they could sell it, and somebody came to look round and they were or just met them outside, and like, you know, and they said, oh, we'll just be here a few weeks of the year. And I guess my face looked a bit sad at that thought, because there was a family who lived there full time. So it is challenging, and I think there is some difficult stuff to hold for people in that. But actually, you know, we're called to be people of peace, and to bring that peace to a community, to be the non-anxious presence in that community that doesn't hold all of the worry and out there, but actually can come and hold people's concerns, but actually share with all concerned in that situation, perhaps offering the opportunity to bring those people together, you know, when to create community when people move in, rather than continuing that sort of alienation of you moved into my place and I didn't really want you here. As church, we have an opportunity to come in and be healing in that process. Maybe, you know, it's hard to dislike people that you know well, and that you don't other them in the same way. So I remember there was a guy in our church who used to just be quite unkind about any person of colour, because that's his experience in life. And but we had people in our church who were people of colour, and when I mentioned that to him and said, sometimes you say things which are offensive to that person, it's like, no, but that's, you know, that's it, just mention the person by name, you know, oh, but that's them, like it's not the same thing. And I think when we, you know, actually when we meet people and we spend time with them, it's harder to just, you know, write them off or think ill of them. When we get to know people, we realize they're just like us, they're just a human, and they're just looking to have their good life. So as church, I think we've got a great opportunity to come and be peacemakers in that situation, and to hold people together to find a new way forward. Not you know, you come into my space or I come into yours, but actually a different way. And
I love that idea of being a non-anxious person of peace. That's a really positive way of where we can be a guest as well, isn't it? Just bringing that non-anxious presence, because so many other people will have an agenda to it. So that's wonderful. It's really good. So thinking that some of the churches might be ready to get going and looking for some support and help, where would you suggest they go for resources, ideas, training, support, anything like that?
Great. Well, obviously, National Estate Churches Network, as it says on the tin. I think we try to be a really positive and uplifting voice into that work. So on our website, which is estatechurches.org, we have lots of resources, ones that are tried and tested in working class urban estate type area, because often I found material was very middle class and didn't really work in those places. So you know, using some material, I asked a question right at the beginning of being on the estate. I said to the children, "What, name another time Jesus did something like that?" And the child put a hand up and said, "Which one's Jesus? Is he the one that was up the tree?" So I was like, okay, maybe we need to start a bit further back. So material that you know works, resources that work, rather than kind of expected thing. I think that's important. So those things are available. We have a newsletter you can sign up on the website, which just keeps people up to date with what's going on in the rest of the world, but also tells stories of what's working well in those estate places. And I think that's important, to have encouraging stories, but also real stories. You know, it's not a quick fix. There's not a golden bullet that's going to make your church 200 people in the next week. It is, particularly on estates, I think it's about relationship, and it is about building that trust with people. And actually, when they know that you're for them and that you care, they'll get involved even if they don't really want to do church, I feel, was what we experienced. Really good if you're on a new housing or you've got new housing coming. There's a thing called newhousinghub.org. Ali Bolton and Penny Marsh are part of that. and they put on a conference once a year. They're really, you know, Ali went into a new estate. She was like the first house to move in, gave out baskets to each new home as they took up space. And just, you know, her story is just inspiring, but also they really thought about and have a really good written program about how you can work on a new estate. So that's worth a look. Some other people that do good stuff in those places is Unlock. They work with particularly youth, I guess, but they've got some new material out that's really good just to help people to reflect on the time that's gone by. And Frontier Youth Trust, also youth work, but you know, good guys to know. And obviously I should say Curbs, because that's who I work for. They have some material online, but also, you know, if you ever want someone to come along and give some ideas about what works well with estate guys, then they're good at that. Yeah, there's a whole lot of things in there. Hopefully there's something that would suit you.
Yeah, great. And then hopefully we can get you to do some training with, if particular churches are interested in doing this, we can get you in and do some workshops in those places if that's possible. So brilliant. Okay, well, thank you very much for your time today, and really appreciated hearing about your work and about the things that you've been doing and your experiences as well. I'm going to continue to be challenged by who sits on my sofa and think about that during the summer holidays. And so thank you very much for your time, and look forward to seeing you again soon. Thanks, Sarah.